KRTT Radio, Nett Radio.
Bringing you full discussions, the hottest topics, and some tracks to keep you moving. The Drivetime Exchange on Nett Radio, taking you above and beyond.
Trinidad is my land, and of it I am proud and glad. But I can't understand why some people just talk it bad. But I know all of them we running them out. Don't know where they're talking about. They would paint your black every day, and the right things they would never say. Like our sportsmen being rated among the best. Our scholars have sit and passed every test and put us right alongside the rest. But then our pitch lake is the greatest one of its kind. Our sugar and oil is really refined. So you see, friends, this is a real thing, Solomon's mind. They just talk some nonsense. Me ain't know where they're doing it for. About so much violence, man, you would swear that we fighting war. Of course, we have we delinquents to face, but just like any other place, look, the things that I say about here is really too much for me to bear, because my people are daily making progress without any form of stupidness, and in this way we must gain success. For when we move in, we all move as one body, no bickering between you and me. For our policy stands for racial equality. Now when a stranger spending a little time in this lovely isle, every day you see him, he always have a hearty smile. When his time is up to depart, he would say with pride in heart, I'll be back, you could bet your life. And if I can't come, I will send my wife. And then he'll tell you he really wants her to come to drink some rum and have plenty fun in this great. Trinidad is my land, and of it I am proud and glad. But I can't understand why some people just talk it bad. But I know all of them we running them out. Don't know where they're talking about. They would paint your black every day, and the right things they would never say. Like our sportsmen being rated among the best. Our scholars have sit and passed every test and put us right alongside the rest. But then our pitch lake is the greatest one of its kind. Our sugar and oil is really refined. So you see, friends, this is a real thing, Solomon's mind. They just talk some nonsense. Me ain't know where they're doing it for. About so much violence, man, you would swear that we fighting war. Of course, we have we delinquents to face, but just like any other place, look, the things that I say about here is really too much for me to bear, because my people are daily making progress without any form of stupidness, and in this way we must gain success. For when we move in, we all move as one body, no bickering between you and me. For our policy stands for racial equality. Now when a stranger spending a little time in this lovely isle, every day you see him, he always have a hearty smile. When his time is up to depart, he would say with pride in heart, I'll be back, you could bet your life. And if I can't come, I will send my wife. And then he'll tell you he really wants her to come to drink some rum and have plenty fun in this great. Trinidad is my land, and of it I am proud and glad. But I can't understand why some people just talk it bad. But I know all of them we running them out. Don't know where they're talking about. They would paint your black every day, and the right things they would never say. Like our sportsmen being rated among the best. Our scholars have sit and passed every test and put us right alongside the rest. But then our pitch lake is the greatest one of its kind. Our sugar and oil is really refined. So you see, friends, this is a real thing, so no man's mind. They just talk some nonsense. Me ain't know where they're doing it for.
All right, everybody, and of course, we welcome you to the Drivetime Exchange right here on New Era TT Radio, taking you above and beyond. And of course, we are the pride and joy, the heartbeat of the Caribbean. And of course, this is where we are joined by none other than our journalist extraordinaire himself, Mr. Tony Fraser. Tony, how are you doing this afternoon? Think you're muted. Yeah, you're still muted. Okay, I still not hearing you because you're still muted. Yeah, check your left.
Yeah, Chalo, hearing me now?
Right, I'm now hearing you.
Yes, sorry about that. I got caught up looking at different kinds of things. Anyhow, good to be here this afternoon. How are you going? How was the weekend?
It was pretty good, Father's Day weekend, how that goes,
Yeah.
Not too much excitement. The more you get into it, it's less and less excitement.
Right. You got your share of good treatment.
I got a lot of good greetings.
All right. So we are here this afternoon to talk about Tobago and the coming hurricane season. You know that we spoke about Trinidad. There was a number of people last week, or was it week before? Week before, I think, about what are the plans to deal with when the heavy rains come and the inevitable floods. So we are dealing with Tobago separate. And we have this afternoon, I'm not sure that he's on just yet, but Alan Stewart, who is the man that deals with all of these matters. He has been the director of TIMA for some time now, the Tobago Emergency Management Authority, the organization which looks after the preparations to deal with heavy rains and flooding and so on. I spoke to him a moment ago. He was attempting to get on as soon as possible, so we have a little delay before he gets on. Just to say, Charles, we're going to have two guests in the program this afternoon in different times, different groups with a different subject matter. After this first one, which we go to about 5 p.m. that is, we're going to have Professor Patrick Watson talking about what is happening in the Middle East. The Middle East is on fire, as it were, Sir Charles.
Yes,
lots of things happening there. So we're going to attend to that at 5 o'clock when we have Professor Patrick Watson to talk about what is happening in the Middle East and what is likely to happen. The last sets of videos that I saw looking quite grim in terms of Iran responding to Israel's first strikes and Israel responding in kind now. So there is a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth in the area. More than what is happening at present would be the implications of what is happening now. How how far will Israel go in terms of attempting to destroy, if that's some thinking on its part in the circumstances, and which other countries will get involved, if at all, in the circumstances. We know, of course, that the United States supports Israel without question. There is no if or when they will attack or assist in the attacks against Iran. So it's a big story here that is happening, and it's happening worldwide. Behind it all, we're going to do the background when we get to that program at 5 o'clock this afternoon. But something of the background is that an attempt is being made, as reported, by Iran to develop nuclear weapons. And of course, the United States and Israel, particularly, are completely against it. And so too are some countries in Europe, including France. The president of France recently came out strongly and warned Iran that it should not move to develop the nuclear weapons. So those are the two major issues we're going to tackle this afternoon. We're still waiting on Alan Stewart, who, as we said, is the director of TIMA in Tobago. That's the Tobago Emergency Management Authority, that deals with the protection of citizens' life and, of course, the infrastructure in Tobago. The hurricane season is upon us, and therefore we have to be concerned. And as householders, as individuals, we have to know to do what is required. You know, sometimes, Charlo, we have this song that we sing in that God is a Trinity and nothing will happen to us, and so on. Foolish kind of a chat.
Yes,
Uh,
yes. Because we have
so
been
we have,
we have been very lucky so far. So I think people take that for granted. But given our past history, it may not have happened much, but it doesn't mean that it cannot happen.
yes. Um, we have, and as I'm sure that listeners would understand and appreciate, we are in the belt where the winds come across the Atlantic. Unfortunately for Trinidad and Tobago, the winds tend to curve upwards and go northwards through the islands, even up to the United States. But in the past, there have been some, brushes with fate, and some of the winds have come across to Trinidad and Tobago. So we can't be too assured
Yeah.
with this foolish God is a Trinity kind of thing. God is a God of the whole world, not only Trinidad and Tobago. So that we have to do the preparations that are required. Yeah, in the meantime, we are listening to a little bit of music in the background. A big song there, Chalo.
Yes, yes. One of your originals there by the Sniper. Yeah, the
Sniper,
Portuguese.
yeah, yeah. And it was supposed to be composed by somebody else, a man who became a
That
vagrant
part of
on
it
the
I
street,
don't know.
actually. Yeah, yeah, it was. It's well known. Sniper never claimed that he composed it. It was composed by a man, a calypso, who had a calypso named Penman. He came into the tents. First, he was all over Port of Spain, obviously with mental problems, and then he seemed to have caught himself for a while. And he sang in the tents thereafter. He passed away some time ago. Penman was his name. And,
I think
it's well
I
known that
remember
he composed the
remember
song.
hearing that name at some point in time, Penman.
Yeah, Penman. He composed this song, and he had another song which made it had to do again with his loyalty to Trinidad and Tobago, and that kind of thing. He seemed to be a very patriotic
Yeah,
individual.
patriotic kind of
And,
person.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, so we are still waiting on Alan Stewart. Maybe we can give him a
Yeah.
buzz there. I think I sent you
Yeah, but what we
the
can do,
number.
play a couple songs until he reaches inside.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Don't know where they're talking about. They would paint you black every day, and the right things they would never say. Like our sportsmen being rated among the best. Our scholars have sit and passed every test and put us right alongside the rest. But then our pitch lake is the greatest one of its kind. Our sugar and oil is really refined. So you see, friends, this is a real thing, Solomon's mind. They just talk some nonsense. Me ain't know where they're doing it for. About so much violence, man, you would swear that we fighting war. Of course, we have we delinquents to face, but just like any other place, look, things that I say about here is really too much for me to bear, because my people are daily making progress without any form of stupidness, and in this way we must gain success. For when we move in, we all move as one body. No bickering between you and me. For our policy stands for racial equality. Now when a stranger spending a little time in this lovely isle, every day you see him, he always have a hearty smile. When his time is up to depart, he would say with pride in heart, I'll be back, you could bet your life. And if I can't come, I will send my wife. And then he'll tell you he really wants her to come to drink some rum and have plenty fun in this great island in the sun. For Trinidadian, as foreigners do recall, it doesn't matter whether big or small, or if you're rich or poor, friends, we cater for one and all. So all of them we're talking, they either drunk or they're steering mad, or maybe they're forgetting Mr. Universe belongs to Trinidad. And yet we have men of talent and skill, with high hopes of improving still. And if you think all this is a lie, the mighty sniper will tell you why. Now our steel band is the best talent in this world. Like calypsos or stories are told, with this rhythm to touch your soul. So Trinidad, this lovely land of my birth, small but overwhelming in worth. And as you know, Carnival is the greatest frolic on earth.
calypso. I am not forgetting Barataria, the place where I grew with my adopted mother. I can't forget my fans who support me in my profession. I say thanks, thanks, thanks. And to the Baptist religion who gave me so much wisdom, glory be, I thank thee. The Prime Minister I cannot make absent, who took me safely through independence. And I cannot forget the mighty sparrow, he established me name through calypso. I thank all the musicians who play my calypso on brass and pan. I say thanks, thanks, thanks. And to the nation, to an esteem for making me the road march queen. So you see, I thank thee. Dear Tobago, the land of my birth, which foreigners don't know. I passed through depression and starvation to be where I am in my profession. So Tobago, I am thankful to you, I wouldn't be ungrateful. I say thanks, thanks, thanks. I thank me mother, me school teacher, me neighbor, me brother and me sister. So you see, Tobago, I thank thee.
Okay, right. So we are back on the inside, Tony, and I feel like our guest is joining us in between here. So play the little calypso rose in the meantime to keep company.
Right. Yeah. So we inside, and we have Mr. Stewart there, Alan Stewart, who's the director of Timor and Tobago, Tobago Emergency Authority, which looks after the management of some people call it bad weather, some others call it good weather, but it's weather nevertheless. Mr. Stewart, thank you for showing up and being with us this afternoon. You got wonderful. All right, you have weathered the storm of life very well. I know you way back when. You don't look like you have been caught in the hurricanes. You have done very well for yourself.
A hurricane of times have its purpose, and if we do well, we survive it. My common statement is always make yourself a hard target. They have their work to do, and we have chosen to live on the surface of the earth, and therefore we have to tend with these natural phenomena.
Right, and as I said, physically you look very well. You've dealt with the storms of life very well, sir. So let's start at the point. We had some weather recently, some rain over a few days. How did it affect Tobago? Did it affect the island in any way at all? Negatively, I guess.
Certainly. It was a very, even though we were expecting it, meaning therefore the hurricane, we are well into the hurricane season. And as we reminisce, we saw what happened to both the southern part of the Caribbean last year. We are just shy away, a couple weeks away from what occurred, probably on the 1st of July last year. And so that expectation, based on what the climatologists and the people at the meteorological centers have been saying throughout the region and across in our parts of the world, it has been predicted that climate change is taking a toll on the cities of these parts of the world, the small island developing states, and we are just part of it. Even though for us in Trinidad and Tobago, most cases of Trinidad, they have not actually experienced. Most of us can't remember anything about a major storm affecting the sister island, Trinidad. But I always tell my colleagues, in 1933, a storm not just passed through Trinidad, but it passed through the southern side of Trinidad. And so it takes away the argument of, being out of the hurricane belt. I tell my colleagues, that the hurricane belt is very prominent from 7 degrees north of the equator. We are 10 and 11 degrees. So therefore, we are in line to be impacted by these hazards. And yes, to the question asked, we were impacted by those waves that came across, and we still see lingering trails or promising trails of additional of those weather conditions coming across from Africa, and they seems to be trailing very low on the in terms of their latitude, and that tells a story that we have to be better prepared. The postures of those of us in the various sectors of the community must demonstrate that we are willing to embrace these challenges because they are part of our lives, and therefore history speaks well to what may have happened to us in the past, and if it happened in the past, it can happen again.
Mr. Stewart, just to track back a little bit, you said something that is of significant interest a moment ago, that am I to understand it as that the hurricane belt, as it were, is going further south than in the previous years? Is that what you meant?
No, what I'm saying is that our history speaks to that. If you speak to the scientists, they will tell you that the hurricane belt started around 7 degrees north of the equator. Trinidad and Tobago is around between 10 and 11 degrees north. However, we have seen the behaviors of these hydrometeorological events that they are trending a little lower than we normally expect them. We look at what happened with just last year. We look at a couple previous years in 2022. We've seen the same pattern where these things are seemingly moving in a latitude that favors us, and therefore we have to be on our guards because our history, even though our written or recorded history does not tell the story, but for those of us who are in the business of this type of risk, we know fully well that in 1933, a storm passed through the southern part of Trinidad and at least killed 11 persons. That speaks volumes. And therefore, we have to be cognizant of what happened with Tomas, what happened before that in 1963, where hurricane destroyed, not just devastated Tobago and changed the face of Tobago. Even the saying I grew up seeing my grandmother saying that, we are the breadbasket of Trinidad in terms of providing a strong agricultural sector, the cocoa industry, the coconut industry, all those things were wiped out. And therefore, the recovery has been long and hard as it relates to, and it's a weak part of the system where in the recovery part of it, I don't think we have done well, judging from all, or not just hydrometeorological events, but also you recall in 1997, the 97 earthquakes, two of which devastated a number of public buildings here on the island of Tobago. And as a result of that, that recovery curve seemingly is very hard. It's an area of interest that we have to do much better. When the cameras roll away, that they move on to another story. You in the media, you will know that. You move on to another exciting story. And then communities and countries, especially in those very rural areas, they tend to fend for themselves because you move on to another chapter of what is eminent and what is most attractive. But it's a real thing that we have to treat with, and I think that the best way to approach it is that we have to constantly look at disaster risk as something that we mitigate against, we prevent where it's possible, and we prepare ourselves for these natural phenomena, because it's all part of our lives.
Right. Okay, so let's go back to last week and the week before when there were some downpours. Anything major happened with regard to destruction of homes, of business places, of flooding in the area? Any particular happenings over the period which alerted the authority to start making the preparation? Well, not start, but get into action, as it were.
Yeah, I think it is well noted that we look at areas that were impacted, and it sends a message to us in terms of our preparedness. For example, the quantities of rain wasn't even the amount to even speak about, but because of the intensity of these rainfall over a period of time, we saw utility lines being affected. We also saw trees, slope instability taking place where trees fell into the roadway. And as a result of that, it had a domino effect on the attendance of school in Tobago. We saw one school in Tobago being flooded out through flash flooding. Not its first occurrence, but it has been, for my time, has been maybe the fifth time in my career that I've seen the Speyside School come under water. And it means, therefore, that it is something that we have to look at, in terms of the utilities, that the robustivity just is not where it ought to be. And then, therefore, it means, therefore, we have to do more. Let me just stick a little bit with communications. When we talk about utilities, we're talking about the power to make it work. We're also speaking about connectivity. Just as how water is a vital part of life, today, such as communication. The young people in our society want to stay connected. And these disruptions create that kind of atmosphere where one is robbed from that ability to stay on board as to what is happening. Another area of concern is the roofs that we saw got blown off. There were two such cases, and it speaks to construction techniques. It speaks to renovations where it's necessary. And so you find that if you are experiencing in a severe weather situation, gusts that is not even up to storm strength, 29 or 28 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour winds, then there's much concern. And therefore, we have to do more in terms of the inner cities or inner rural areas and also urban areas. There's a pocket within our society. Let me use Trinidad as an example. There are some places in Laventil, the Beetham, they are on the outskirts of the city. And while we build according to building codes, those same buildings who are not adhering to those codes are definitely going to become the missiles that destroy what have been built according to code. So you have that phenomenon. And I saw it happening in this last event where in the Stolly Park area, there was a loss of a roof of a restaurant and bar that came off. It was just within half an hour after making an announcement that, there is some winds coming in and you could expect some gusts. One was not expecting it to take off that size of roof, and lap it. And there was the same thing happening in the Buku area where property lost its roof and two persons were displaced. And it tells a story going into the season how we need to build resilience at that level in the community, and also even pockets within our urban communities where you sense to have a level of poverty and a level of people are more tied to how you survive. And then, taking that extra in the disaster management mechanism, Anthony, they normally will say 7% of the additional costs for the building itself can take care of a sturdy roof. but it's just not happening, and therefore there are concerns for us.
Building codes, of course, would be a major thing to be put in place. The question is, can, as you talked about, people at lower income levels, can they afford the kind of construction that will be required in terms of building codes put in place?
I was seeing my little time here have allowed me to see what government have done, some of which are the practices in the sense that there have been settlement programs that speaks to home improvement grants, and therefore I think we have to review quite a lot as to how we administer these programs, and sometimes the requirement for the applicant to be qualified, even though he may be qualified, the process sometimes is beyond those persons who have to do the applications, and therefore while you're trying to manage transparency, accountability, there is too much bureaucracy in the system, and therefore we have to find easier ways to those who are the last mile and those who doesn't find themselves in an area where they can take care of themselves with the necessaries, either mentally or otherwise, to fill out the forms and do all these things. You're talking about people coming from a particular place where survival means everything to them, and therefore their focus is not there, but they really need the help. I remember in 2007, we started a program called an Impact Assessment and Special Needs Program, which targeted communities, residential properties. And it was between 87, close to 90% of the homes were not being able to withstand a Category 3 hurricane in Tobago. It lent itself to some activities. I just mentioned the home improvement program that was put on by the Tobago House of Assembly. Have it reached its goal? Have it really touched some of the lives that really, some of the people that really matters? It have not, because there's a divide between who can and who can access these things. And therefore, it's areas that we have to look at in the strains of bureaucracy as to how we make it easy for accessibility. You find that even outside of that, you have, I remember AmCham and also Habitat of Humanities. These organizations have came in and tried to bridge the gap because they are less bureaucracy, but the capacity at that level, based on the magnitude of what needs to be done, sometimes these philanthropists, they don't just have it, they don't have the necessaries to carry all that burden. And therefore, these are areas that I think that we have to rethink and make ourselves build resilience within our communities.
So we are talking with Alan Stewart, who is the head of TIMA in Tobago, and looking after the needs and projecting into some of the things that are absolutely required. So if you, Mr. Stewart, can give our listeners an appreciation of some of the major things that your organization is advocating and attempting to educate and inform the population in Tobago about what to do with the inevitable heavy rains that will come, and who knows more than that. So what are the major pieces of advice that TIMA is giving out in Tobago?
I think that among us here, special needs, and there are persons that are below the poverty lines or within the reach of the system, and therefore these people need to come forward. There is a need for intervention. We have started a program in the communities called Search 1000 Strong. Since 2005, Tobago has opted to have a professional search program, which they function at 24/7 as a result of the specific needs of the island in terms of, or topography and or exposure forced us to go that route. But we realized that we also need to prepare the island for what can be considered a catastrophic event, something like 1963. So we have embarked on that program, and probably I'm using my forum now to say, folks, you need to get on board, become a volunteer in your community and get be tooled, be trained, and get the necessaries to understand the risks that your communities are exposed to, and that within the fabrics of the government structures themselves, the quantities are not there, and therefore it's important that communities, families, start preparing themselves for catastrophic event, meaning therefore ensure that you can take care of yourself for 72 hours. I have seen people have difficulties to trying to prove who they are. They're simply not going to the bank because they have to lose their valuables, they have to lose their identification cards, this, that, the other. And therefore, these are little things that you can do to making yourself a hard target. Looking at trees that are in your surrounding, ensure that that tree that you're watching grow, you have to make a decision when to cut it. And now is the time to have it trimmed. Now is the time to buy that 3 pounds of nails or screws and take care of the periphery of your roofs. That is all sometimes it takes. And therefore, those activities are important to building resilience. We recognize that Tobago, we live on the periphery of the island, most of our villages are, and therefore, especially being exposed to the Atlantic Ocean, it is very ferocious, and therefore, the saline environment does not work well with our galvanized type roofing, and therefore, one needs to secure them as much as possible to prevent that wind from getting inside of it and things like that. On the other side, apart from, we always hammering the residential properties, but I think the government have a role to play in leadership in terms of how we approach bringing in laws and legislation that will allow. So over the years, I have been part of the national discussion as it relates to legislation for working with our constitution and legislation agenda to ensure that disaster management laws. Earlier on, we were speaking about we were talking about building codes and land use policy. Just as how we like to have the beaches built on the beaches, build our hotels on the beaches, we have to understand what comes along with it. And therefore, we have to make laws that will allow us to really manage things. The disaster offices in the country needs to have the teeth in order to do things a little better. It cannot be just by MOUs and MOAs and a memorandum of understanding. We need to, that level of alacrity needs to exist among our policymakers, where they understand that they have a key role in building that resilience that is necessary in our communities and various sectors. Our engineering, the roads, you look carefully, the walls that are used now, I use its intention seemingly to have the road becoming a drain, and those 6 inches of the curb wall.
All right, we seem to be getting some interference there with the audio. We're talking with Alan Stewart, who is the head of TIMA in Tobago, the agency which is responsible for alerting, preparing residents and business people for the possibility of storm, hurricane intervention, and some of the things that have to be done. We seem to have lost him for a moment. I think he's back now. Go ahead, Mr. Stewart. Good. Go ahead.
So we want to a nice little juicy part there, but we are speaking about more to be done in the area of, the United Nations have been speaking part of their, the Sendai framework speaks to disaster governance. And therefore it requires us to pull back a little bit and take a good look at ourselves, especially I did mention we are small island developing states. And therefore, we have to, as Motley, Prime Minister Motley said, we hold that very short stick in the Caribbean, and therefore everything that is coming our ways, we are not the real contributors to it. But you know, we have our own dabbling in the as it relates to oil and gas, and therefore we are part of our own problem in terms of renewable energies and things like that. So it's important that we understand that diversification is very important if we are to make meaningful changes to the world. We ourselves have to demonstrate that we are willing to go that direction. So these are some of the big picture. I think when I got group off, we were speaking about our infrastructure as it relates to mitigating and preventing flooding, flash flooding, and things like that. And I think from where I sit, we don't see a mirroring of the task that is ahead of us, in the sense that you want to look at the challenge that the world is facing you and your infrastructure. The engineering needs to resemble it. The engineering needs to stand up against what is coming our way, or the techniques that we use. We have to look at our dimension of drainage in terms of the box, what is well known around as the box drain. Does it carry the carrying capacity of the type of waters that we see falling in short order? The soil, the percolation that's on the soil and wet areas are not there anymore. And therefore, it's all concrete, and therefore, we have to make those adjustments. So the planning aspect in terms of exposure is quite important to all of this. And that speaks to land use policy and how there are some things that are fixed, and therefore retrofitting becomes absolutely necessary. And so I think I've said a mouthful there.
Right. Yeah, definitely very significant matters there. The infrastructure, we have to put in all of the things that are required. Let me ask you, Mr. Stewart, about the capacity of Tobago to deal as shelters for people who get flooded out, people who may be in difficult areas of the island, the areas that will be flooded all the time. Is there sufficient of that capacity in place to look after people who can leave their homes and go to shelters?
Yeah, I think you're picking up the area of the hydrometeorological hazard. So while flooding is not one of the major areas of impact on the island, major as I said, but we look at slope failures to be having that impact. And I think our shelter management system, we have to get around the table and have a very fierce look at it, understanding that what are the possibilities. Yes, we utilize our community centers as of primary shelters, our schools, secondary, and our church and other buildings as the alternative. That can be set straight across Trinidad and Tobago. We have not had an event that really tested our shelter management capacity. But one can easily understand, if you look at what happened with Kayaku last year, that if that storm, because one time I came to the sense that if I did not believe in God, I believe in God after watching the behavior of Beryl when it lined up to be. It means, therefore, that if we were to be impacted by such a storm, that we will have massive losses in terms of slope failures and homes that are built on the hillsides in Tobago, and that is Tobago's major problem. And therefore, it's a very expensive loss. It's not just water flooding the home and runoff, and you back it cleaned out and you go. You will be losing property. And therefore, with these either winds or landslides impact, we saw it in 2004 through the November severe weather. And before that, Tony, I think you were very much active in the media back then. You saw it in Hurricane Ivan. And then the following year, in 2005, we saw what happened with Hurricane or Tropical Storm Emily, as it impacted some of the Caribbean islands and inclusive of Jamaica. I think that was a straw that changed disaster management even in Trinidad and Tobago, where back then the Patrick Manning, our Prime Minister, God bless his soul, would have moved for a significant change from NEMA to ODPM. Those are the straws that broke that camel back, and we have seen it happen. So it means, therefore, we have to recognize that these events, we have to make some serious changes as to how we approach these events. And I'm saying to you, the shelter management program, another great area or weak area in the shelter management program is all volunteerism. I'm not sure if you ever think about that, but it's volunteerism. While the first responders and everybody else are paid to respond to emergencies, the people who man the shelters are all volunteer. I remember sitting with the chief secretary while he was chairing the disaster management committee here in response to one of these events. And he said, why are the shelters not occupied as yet? Are they not being paid to do a job? And I said, no, sir, these are all volunteers. And there are certain aspects of our disaster management mechanism that beg water doesn't cut it. And too many of our systems in the country are depending on just that, especially disaster preparedness. It's a lot of beseeching and begging. It's not commanded by legislative, you do it, I say come and you come and that kind of stuff. It's if you feel like doing it. To me, that is something that you have to tend to.
Are Tobagonians of the same view as some Trinidadians that God is a Trini and therefore nothing will, occur to us dramatically?
Not at all. You know that there is this saying, who knows it feels it all. Who knows it all, something like that. And the Tobagonian has a different approach in terms of the quantities, the amount of time that we have been. If you listen to me talking, I've been talking from 1933, 1963, Tomas, the storms between the 2005, 2004, and coming down the road, 2010. These are events that impacted Tobago fiercely. So there's a different mentality in terms of how we look at our risks. We look at them differently in Tobago. It allowed the message to get to them because people have had the experience.
Well, that's great. They're a little bit smarter than we are here in Trinidad. So, Mr. Alan Stewart,
I'm not sure if it's smart is the word. I think it's a question of your experiences, what you have experienced. Yeah.
All right, so Alan Stewart, who is the director of TIMA in Tobago, the agency responsible for informing, educating, and doing all the works the clear-up work and so on. Well, I am sure as an agency, it's the directorship for the other agencies to go out and do the work. I am sure, Mr. Stewart, that we're going to come back to you as the season goes on to hear how things are transpiring in Tobago with regard to the weather. Just before we go, what are the forecasts in terms of how many big storms, hurricanes? Have we had any of that at all with regard to Tobago?
Yeah, while it's not specific to Tobago in terms of how the National Hurricane Center and all of the pundits put together how they do it, but I know that there are 24 storms that have been, that we can see coming through the region, through the chains of islands of the Eastern Caribbean, the archipelago of islands, when we put it that way. And there is that possibility, based on how we are set, that any one of them can cause serious problems in the Caribbean. That has been our history. So these islands are set to be impacted once again, and we just have to prepare ourselves and do what is necessary in order to avert. I always look at disaster management, and probably these are my last words I would like to pointed out, my years of looking at these things, I recognize it required a pentagon approach, that it involves strongly prevention,
Right.
preparedness, things like that, response, rehabilitation, and mitigation. These are the five major sides of the disaster management cycle. During this period, we like to focus on preparedness and response, but I harp a little bit on our mitigation sides, the rules and the laws that will allow things to go in a particular way and not just to their own people up to their own will to get it done, but it needs to be driven from a very strong position.
Alan Stewart of Tima in Tobago, thank you very much. And as we said, we sure are going to come back to you later on in the season and to hear what is happening in Tobago and how we are dealing with it on the island. Thank you very much for coming and chatting with us today. And we will see you again at some point in the future.
Okay, Mr. Fraser, continue good minutes.
Okay, Charlo, so that we are going on to another interview. We have Professor Patrick Watson. I don't know if he's in the waiting room just yet to come in, and we are going to shift the subject to what's happening in the Middle East. Big news coming out of the Middle East over the last 3-4 days. There have been some significant developments in terms of Israel attacking Iran responding, missiles going back and forth. I heard or read something on the BBC before coming onto the program this afternoon talking about the Israeli army hitting Iran very hard in terms of military targets and even moving into residential areas. So we need to talk about that and what are the circumstances that could lead to a spillover of that kind of activity everywhere in the world, including in the Caribbean. Okay, Charlo, you have Professor Watson just here at the moment.
He's joining. I don't know if the internet is giving him other problems. I'm seeing it saying joining, but it has not actually joined as yet.
As yet. All right, so we're going to wait until he gets everything in order. As we say, we're going to look into the Middle East, the conflict that is going on. We've been having the conflict for the last 2 years with regard to Gaza and the attacks by Israel, which of course they were prompted by an attack from Hamas in the first instance on Israel, southern Israel. And we know what has transpired with that. The Gaza is all but rubble. And I saw a figure today, some 5,000 plus people have been killed, murdered in many ways by Israeli bombs supplied by the United States going into the Gaza. The Gaza is pure rubble at this point in time. I think I see Professor Watson coming up there. Yes, we see him on the screen here. Good afternoon to you, sir. So you need to unmute your microphone so that we get to hear what you're saying. You're on, the picture is on, however, your microphone is muted, and therefore you have to unmute the mic for us to talk with you and you to chat with us.
All right, so he's
All right. Your microphone, I don't know if you're hearing me, but your microphone is muted, and therefore you have to unmute your microphone. Does not seem to be hearing me, Sir Charles.
I don't know. Mr. Watson?
He's unmuted. He's unmuted it for now.
Right. He's got
okay. So you're hearing us now?
I'm hardly hearing you, Tony. Hardly hearing you.
I don't know what is happening there. I am as close to the microphone as I possibly can get.
Yeah.
Let me try. I'm going to try my iPhone and see if it makes a difference.
Yeah. Maybe you could turn up your volume.
It's fully up. It's up 100%.
Okay. So are you hearing me any better now?
I am hearing you, but I can't see. All right, I put on my phone and I'm hearing you. I am hearing you better here.
Right.
Wonderful. Okay.
I'm gonna have to use your phone.
Yeah. So I have been going over the introduction with regard to the subject matter that we are talking about. We are talking about the conflict that has arisen over the last 3-4 days in the Middle East, with first of all Israel launching attacks on Iran and Iran responding in kind. And we know something of the background to that, tied up in the whole business of the what is said to be Iran's preparation to get nuclear capacity, which unnerves Israel and, of course, the United States. And if we go back a little bit, we would know that there was a point in time during the Obama administration where there seemed to be some kind of coming to the table, the international, what was it called, international inspectorate of the nuclear weapons. That's the best I can get to what the real title was. Going into Iran and searching and reporting and so on. And then, of course, when the government changed, Donald Trump scuttled all of that. And since then, there has been conflict going back and forward. What's your take on it as to what has happened now and why it has happened?
So is that addressed to me or?
Yeah, that's addressed to you.
Yeah, all right. Let me say Israel has always been treated very special, yeah? I'm getting an echo. That's
Yeah. So so you're staying on the iPhone?
yeah. I'm staying on the
Spend on the
iPhone.
iPhone. Well, then you have to probably have to come off of the other one.
All right, let me do that, okay? Let me leave that. All right, I'm leaving it. I'm not sure that is helping.
Right.
All right.
That is it there.
Yeah, all right. You know that Israel has never been subject to the equivalent of what you call the inspectorate. Israel has always been treated very specially. And it's amazing how they have dealt with Iran and other countries as well, and in a way that they have never dealt with Israel. And it's amazing. Today I saw some interviews. I don't know if these interviews are fake, but I mean, I would imagine that they are. There was a woman who was speaking, and she is more or less saying that Iran cannot have these things because they cannot trust it, whereas Israel can be trusted. And Israel is the one who is doing the aggression in that part of the world. And one of the things that we are seeing for certain is Israel counts totally, almost totally on the United States of America. They always have the backing of America, which seems to be a little bit lacking this time, but I don't know when that will change. But one thing is for certain in the current scenario, it is that Israel attacked Iran, and Israel took out and attempted to take out some places, and it involved the destruction of some locations and the killing of some people. That was an open act of aggression, and Iran has responded, and I think quite correctly so. Nobody could blame Iran for responding because Iran is now dealing with an act of aggression against its sovereign territory. What I find amazing, I mean, when in these days of fake news and so on, I could never tell when some of these things are fake, but some of the reports I see coming out and I hear Netanyahu speak, almost as if, he's saying things like they are targeting civilian targets, whereas they did not target civilian targets. That's what they are, that they're saying. Although they just targeted a television station, and they admitted to that as well. And you would believe that somehow in the mind of the Israeli, and it's a Nazi type of logic, they do not view the Palestinian as a human being. So you treat with the Iranian in a way, or the Iranian should treat with you the Israeli in a much different way than you, the Israeli, are dealing with the Palestinian. They have herded the Palestinians into a slaughterhouse. That's fundamentally what it is. And they are just killing them. They're picking them off like flies. And it's almost like a big joke to some of them. You see some of them parading in women's clothes that they would have found. You'd see them harassing children and shooting at targets and bombing hospitals and making all the assertions that Hamas is hiding people under the beds, is hiding people in tunnels, and so on. And that's another thing. And they're making this an issue about Hamas. Hamas came into being in 1987. The Nakba dates back to 1948. And as you mentioned in an article that you wrote today, the Balfour Declaration dates back to 1917. Now, in those days, the imperial powers could do almost what they liked, even up to the 1940s. But that clearly, even from the beginning, did not stand, and it certainly is not standing today. So what we are witnessing and what is becoming very, very delicate and could lead us into a serious conflagration based on all the evidence we have from history and so on, is a power in the Middle East, which is Israel, an imposed power. It's Israel, and people must not forget this. Israel is a settler colony. Israel was created by the imperial powers for the sake of the imperial powers. And nearly everybody, apart from the original population of 1917, nearly everybody inside of Israel has at least a grandparent who came from abroad. And many of them continue to hold passports from abroad. So when they leave the country, as many are doing now, because they are running from the fighting, they go easily back to Europe. They go to France, they go to Poland, they go to Germany, they go to the United States.
In fact, President Trump is inviting them to come to the United States for shelter.
Yes. And it's because, and they can do it even without going as a refugee, and because they have the right to go back to the United Kingdom, back to France, back to Germany, back to Poland, back to Lithuania, wherever they want to go, because that's where they came from in the first place. Mm-hmm. The original populations are treated, the closest analogy, the closest comparison to this, it's not the same thing, but it's a close comparison, is what happened in South Africa. That settlers came in, took the land, and treated the native populations, the original populations, as second class, and they herded them. And Zionism, as it is practiced, is a form of apartheid. And this is something that in the 20th, the 21st century, we must not tolerate. The world must not tolerate this.
One question, Professor Watson, is why is the United States so attached to Israel, so protective of Israel, but not only protective in the present, but over the decades have sent billions and billions of dollars and expertise, ammunition, arms, etc. Why?
There are two reasons. One is it's in the US's interest to have what can be seen as, which is not a puppet state in that part of the world. That is a part of the world rich in resources. It's a strategically located place near the Suez Canal. Remember, that was an important point in the 1940s. It's closer to Russia than, well, it would have been the Soviet Union at the time, than many other places. There are hundreds of bases, maybe not hundreds, certainly dozens of bases in and around Iran and in and in the Middle East more generally. So they do have their interests. However, you must not in any way discount what can be called the Zionist lobby, the Jewish lobby, AIPAC. In the United States, there is hardly a politician sitting in Congress now who does not benefit from funding from AIPAC. I don't know if your listeners will know what AIPAC is, but it's a Zionist-funded organization that is filthy rich. Remember, if we go back to the Balfour Declaration, The person who led the charge of the Balfour Declaration was none other than Lord Rothschild. I mean, if you know that name, that is a name synonymous with billions and billions of dollars. It was
Financial industry.
yes, it was that the case then, and it's the case now. So when the Balfour Declaration was negotiated, the word negotiation is a bit of a far-fetched term. When it was signed in 1917, it was already backed by a considerable amount of power. Now, in those days, the colonial powers were a little bit more bold-faced than they are now. They would get away with making racist remarks that these Arabs they are really not good for the empire, and so on. And people would accept that. It's almost like seeing Arabs, and to say call somebody an Arab and call somebody a nigger was the same thing in those days, and it probably still is in the eyes of the Israeli settler. And that is how it all began. And it was always backed by a considerable amount of money. And when the original population, they welcomed the original Jews who were coming as refugees from Europe, and then all of a sudden they turned on them like smallpox. And the famous word, the Nakba. The Nakba is what the disruption of the original Palestinians that took place. You referred to it in your article today on Facebook, Tony.
Yeah.
And that Nakba resulted in the forced expulsion from Palestine of thousands and thousands of Palestinians. And as you pointed out,
750,000.
yes, many of them never returned, and the Nakba never ended. The Nakba has continued. So when Hamas came into being in 1987, you already, as an organization, the Nakba is already 40 years old. So if you form a defense organization 40 years later, you didn't do very well. I mean, you brought this in. And yet every time they talk, they say Hamas. I say Hamas is the man. Two words they use a lot. Hamas and anti-Semite. That anybody who opposes Israel, they call them anti-Semite. And we must be very careful ourselves not to conflate the two. There are many Jews who are opposed to Zionism. Many, many Jews who are opposed to Zionism. And there are many non-Jews who are in favor of Zionism. And the American political class, for want of a better term, is one of those. They have no problem. So yes, there are two things. There's a powerful lobby on behalf of Israel that exists all over the world, and in the case of the United States, it appears in the form of AIPAC and other forms. But there's also the fact that America has interest in that part of the world. Europe has interest in that part of the world. In the case of some countries like Germany, it's a case of bad conscience. They seem to, they cannot, they feel so guilty about what they did. I mean, you just have to look at films like Inglourious Bastards and so on to see, or Schindler's List, to see the kind of treatment that they meted out the Jews. By the way, that's the very same treatment that the Israelis, and I'm choosing my words carefully, I'm not saying Jews, saying Israelis, these are settlers who have come from all over, who may be of Jewish, most likely of the Jewish faith. I could tell you the truth, many of them are atheists. They are not really religious people at all, but yet they say that God gave the land to them, and they are the ones who are treating the Palestinian people in the very same way, worse in fact, and the way the Nazis treated their Jewish forebears.
Sometimes in my mind, I think that, they should go and attack the Germans. The Germans are the ones who dealt with them, not the Palestinians. Of course, that's a foolish thought to just say it.
No, it's not, Tony. Let me put it this way. They solved the Jewish problem, which they created. I'm talking about the Europeans. The white, let me call them for want of a different term, because those who migrated are also white. I have no doubt about it, that those who have settled in Palestine, they're not a different ethnicity necessarily. They are as white. In fact, many a time, even during the war, a Jew could have passed unnoticed unless he said he was a Jew, or unless you knew that he was a Jew.
He
Because
had a name that was exposed.
they looked alike. And they are the ones, Russia, Germany, France, all of them had their Jewish problem. They created the problem. And how did they attempt to solve it? By creating a homeland in another man's country. You understand? Displacing another one. The Palestinian people lived in harmony with the Jewish population that was there. It was a minority, but they lived in harmony. It was in 1948, and but the conflict started even before that, where they started to come in droves.
It was, in fact, a war in the 1930s.
Yes, yes.
When the Palestinians responded.
Yeah.
And of course, the culmination was in 48.
So, yes, you are right. They should have created a Jewish state if they wanted out of it. But you see, Rothschild wanted Palestine, and they wanted that. You will notice in the Balfour Declaration, there is no mention, and that's one thing I want to take you up on your little article this morning. There's no mention of the name Israel in the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration speaks of a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine. That is what was said. When it was created in 1948, the name Israel was given to them, but that's not a name that is germane to the Balfour Declaration.
Did not exist.
No, because Israel did not exist. And that's the point that Israel came into being in 1948, courtesy imperial powers, in particular Britain, but eventually and more importantly, the United States of America.
The Britain, in fact, had the mandate, and it really wanted to wash its hands of the whole issue. And America walked into the situation.
That's right. By the 1930s, Britain started to get worried about it. It was clear. And I don't know if you ever saw the film. I didn't understand it when I was a child, but I looked at it again the other day. The British were concerned. That film called Exodus. I don't know if you saw. The British
were like a long time ago.
Yeah, the British were very concerned about what was going on and started to turn against it. And it is the Americans who took they took it over, and Britain ceased to be an important part of the Zionist movement around that time. Although, as you see, even up to today, with a Labour government and with a black man as Minister of Foreign Affairs, or the equivalent of it, they are supporting Israel unreservedly. And they are as fervent as Zionists as anybody living in Israel.
In fact, I'm sure that you saw the interview with the leader of the Conservative Party, the black woman, and she was more Jewish than anybody else. But I want us to go for the remaining of the program to look at the situation and the possible outcomes of what is happening. We have Iran, and their trading blows back and forth. I saw one report on the BBC now also before I came on the air, indicating that Israel was in deep control and causing heavy damage in Iran. I don't know if that was absolutely the case. And I saw another one which said that Iran doing a miraculous kind of thing, bombing Tel Aviv, which is a kind of sacred territory that nobody else has reached into. How do you think this thing is going to evolve, and especially with the side players? The United States, you have the rest of the Arab world, and even Russia. What is going to happen in all of this thing going on?
Let me say what I hope will happen, but this could be as early as possible, but it may take some time. I think we are going to see, I think that, and maybe I should say I hope, that this is the beginning of the end of the Zionist state of Israel. I think that Israel will eventually, as it is now, it will cease to exist. Again, I'm following what I saw happened in South Africa, that the apartheid system came to an end and people continue to live there. The ideology of Zionism would be discredited, just like Nazism and so on. But that is not going to happen without a serious fight. Now, compared to the end of the Nazi era, when they were crushed at the end of the war, and compared to South Africa, nobody in all of that had the nuclear weapon, and nobody then could use the nuclear weapon. What we have in the current situation is it may very well be that the Zionists will say, if I can't exist, nobody will exist. And they have, you remember, Iran does not have a nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
Iran has to depend on its sponsors in the sense you're talking about, and they're getting them more and more, more and more. They are being openly declared. China, Turkey, Pakistan. Pakistan has actually threatened to come in on their side with the use of the bomb if Israel should get out of hand. So from day to day, we don't know.
There is that Muslim Islamic connection across the road.
Yes. Now, let me say one thing, Anthony. I am always a bit concerned when people make this an Islamic issue, including the Muslims, when they make this an Islamic issue, that this is Muslim solidarity. Palestine is a human issue. Just as how South Africa was not just a black issue, it was a human issue. Human beings have no right tolerating that, what went on in South Africa. They have no right tolerating what happened to the Jews during the war. They have no right tolerating what is now going on with the Palestinians, many of whom happen to be Muslim. And remember, there are non-Muslims living there as well.
The Christian population there.
Yes. It's not enormous, but it's sizable, and it's not. But they are Christian Palestinians, and they live there. So my own feeling is that we should have a one Palestine state, and everybody should live, including the settlers if they wish it. Just as how in South Africa the white settlers, the descendants of the white settlers, were allowed to stay. Although all of a sudden with Elon Musk, they're finding out that they're being persecuted and all of that, and they want to go to America because they're being subjected to racism in South Africa. I'm saying that very sarcastically. Yeah. So the reality is, though, that from one day to the next, I am unable to predict what will happen. These exchanges of gunfire, they are happening, and it's real. Israel is bombing Tel Aviv, Israel is bombing Haifa, and the gun talk is taking place on both sides. So the
Iran is bombing Tel Aviv.
Yes,
Israel.
Iran is bombing Tel Aviv. Yes, and it's a fairly successful. And at the moment, they are bombing all kinds of areas, and apparently they are not using the most sophisticated weaponry. From what we are hearing, they're just targeting it in a short way. The full regalia has not been unleashed on Israel yet. What we have at this point in time is America is not, I am not seeing any evidence that America is supporting them militarily in this venture, although a lot of that support would have gone before. There is a lot of talk, a lot of people like Bernie Sanders, a lot of commentators saying, let's keep out of that. This is not our business. My own feeling is that if they decide to send troops there, the Americans, I don't think they will reach that point because all the Israelis need from them is their weapons. But if they do decide to send troops there, I have a feeling that they are going to refuse. But sending the weapons is something that they will do. And what that is likely to cause is America then becomes a legitimate target. And I'm talking about any part of the American mainland. And so what they like to call terrorist activity is likely to start happening on American places all over, including in the bases around Iran, including in any part of the world where the Americans are, including the American mainland. That is what is going to happen. Now, if that starts to happen and the Americans decide to respond, by upping the ante. Sorry, what is going to happen is that countries like China and Russia are going to intervene. In fact, Putin has already promised that that Russia and Iran are friends, and he will intervene on behalf. Pakistan has already done so. Now, what you then have, although Iran is not a nuclear power, these countries that I just called are nuclear powers, and they can trade nuclear warheads with each other.
Right.
That is not a nice thing for mankind. If that should happen,
Right.
we should really.
Right.
So what I cannot predict what will happen from day to day, but however I look at it and however optimistic I try to be, the outcome is not looking rosy. All right, that's what I'm saying. I am. If I were to put a probability on it, there is more likely to be widespread involvement, wider participation in what is going on there than no. So that could then involve Russia, China, Turkey, and many other places.
Right. And of course, we have to include the Arab states. There's Arab states who are, hesitant about getting physically involved, but they're surely going to lend some support. Surely the populations of the Arab countries, the leaders may be hesitant, but the populations of those countries are surely looking out for their Palestinian brothers.
That is true. You're likely to get revolts in these countries, because I don't think that what the Jordanians in Egyptians, I understand Egyptians are doing things to prevent some of the rockets from flying into Israel. That Jordan, I think, is one of the countries that has been accused. But even recently, Saudi Arabia, of all places, which is the one that I would think would be the last one to want to say
Goes to the United States, yeah.
yes, they said that they are going to take the sides of the Palestinians. And I think they are probably reading correctly the sentiment of the population. Remember, that's where Osama bin Laden is from. So that kind of sentiment is prevalent in Saudi Arabia. It may not be with the sheiks and all of them, but the sentiment that Palestine is Arab, that Palestine is Muslim, it's a big thing to many, many people. And the populations are going to be up in arms. Let me say this too. The populations of the European countries are not going to allow this up neither. They are not going to stand back and let Britain go to war with and there are already open voices on the ground in England and France. And I said, we are stop doing that, and they are up in revolt. So there is a widespread sentiment.
They've been protesting for months, actually. Months and months. But let's look at another thing. Sorry, you wanted to finish that?
No, you go.
Let's look at another element of this, which involves Trinidad and Tobago. What is going to happen with the energy industry that is surely going to be affected if there is this, spreading of the conflict across the Arab states?
Let me say, I'm going to say this in two parts. There is very likely, and there's already an upward pressure on the price of oil. That is, and of course, concomitantly gas, okay, which is the more important thing for us. But several things have to be considered among that. These prices are going up, but the kinds of shortages that resulted around COVID, for instance, are going to happen as well. So whereas we may get more money, and I'm going to get back to that because I'm not that is not, I'm going to explain why that is unlikely to happen. Whereas we have a higher price for the product, we are going to probably have to pay higher prices for growing goods which are becoming scarcer, goods that we have to get into the
market. Grains and so on and so on.
Yes. But for the first time, not the first time, it's been happening for a little while now, we are producing less and less of the hydrocarbon product, less and less. In particular, oil. I mean, we oil used to be 100 plus a barrel. Now oil is very low, but we are producing less and less oil. So even if the price goes up to $200, we are not going to be able to take full advantage of that. I'm talking about Trinidad and Tobago,
Yeah.
because we are not producing that quantity anymore. We are not Venezuela, where oil grows on trees. We are not that at all. So the little bit we have, and of course there can be an improvement with gas and so on if we are allowed to go to Venezuela. The current administration is making certain noises that, to me, are quite worrisome. These noises. We have no right to be choking fire with our Venezuelan neighbor, especially as our livelihood is likely to have to depend on it. But there are certain elements within that administration, and I know them because I see them on Facebook. They are not just anti-Maduro; they are pro-Trump. Now that's a frightening thing.
Yeah.
When you have people pandering to Trump at a time when his popularity, even among his MAGA red hats, is falling and waning, where he is likely to come under even more intense pressure because of what is going on in the Middle East. You cannot be serious about aligning your fortunes to pleasing Trump.
In fact, some of the policy measures that they are adopting look very much like they've come straight from the Trump, barnyard, as it were.
Yeah, and that is
Yeah.
a frightening thing.
Yeah.
I will say to you, I spoke to a high-ranking UNC person before the elections. They wanted me to come on the platform because I was advocating to put the PNM out of office.
Right.
But I knew that one of the shortcomings of the UNC, because it was almost certain that if the PNM loses its seat, because the UNC will win. And one of the shortcomings of the UNC administration is its attitude to foreign policy. I do not like and cannot tolerate this pro-American stance, and in particular, the currently pro-Trump stance.
Yes.
And that is a frightening thing for
All right. Let's put
Tony.
another
I may have
perspective.
to go in a short while.
Right. That's why I want you to finish this off here.
Yes.
We put this Middle East crisis in the context of what is happening in Russia and Ukraine now. So you have these two difficult situations in two tremendously important parts of the world. So you have to use an American expression, you have a double whammy coming from Europe and from the Middle East. What kinds of impacts? And this is my last question to you so that you can leave. What kinds of impacts you expect it will have on the world?
The situation in Ukraine and it's largely because of Trump's own attitude towards it. That antagonism toward Russia is not as intense as it was, although there is some kind of wavering from time to time. My own position on the matter is that Ukraine was something that could have been avoided, and it is the Americans who pushed it and caused the Russians to respond. And just now, it's not Patrick Watson telling you that there are well-known American voices, including Kissinger. Imagine Kissinger, who warned them about this, who told them, why are you, after the 1990s, when the World War, why are you insisting on NATO? But no, they came back, Bill Clinton, and then they came back with it. And they kept coming forward, and then Russia just drew the line in the sand and said, we go no further with this. And they do not want NATO in their backyard. And that is a proper thing. You cannot have an armed nuclear power on your doorstep. The Americans will not allow that, and the Russians are not going to allow it. So
the Americans are not allowing it in the Middle East.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
So Ukraine is not likely to end in favor of the Western powers. Ukraine is likely to go on its knees to Russia. I cannot imagine that the Russians will allow anything else from that point of view, because it's a question of their own survival. They're going to be looking at it that way. I think, though, that um, that is another show, Tony, to talk about
Yeah.
the situation in Ukraine, because
I'm
that
going
is
to
how,
invite you back for that separately.
yes,
Yes, so we thank you very much. We know that you have something to attend to, but we thank you very much for giving us your perspective on these matters in the Middle East. And with them, as I indicated, with the two things coming together, we are in a difficult spot in the world. Some people are predicting the worst. Hopefully, some diplomacy will enter the place, and some logic and sense will prevail to avoid the worst possible outcome for the world.
let's hope so. Let's hope so, but it doesn't look good. I mean, we must say, and anything could happen. As I said, we don't know what foolishness could happen. And you see, with a man like Netanyahu, he could do an act of provocation, like bomb something in the United States of America, and they blame it on it. It's a Gulf of Tonkin,
Yeah,
that,
yeah. And
that,
of course, with Netanyahu, he is protecting his own life
oh yes,
from going in jail and
yeah,
whatever
yes,
else that will happen,
yeah,
so that he's hanging on.
yeah. Tony, I do have to go.
Patrick Watson, thank you very much for
My
coming and
pleasure, Tony.
with us.
My
We chat
pleasure.
again.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, so Sir Charles, that's that part of the discussion. We dealt with the two things: the Tobago issue about the weather and the ability to protect the island from the worst possible outcomes. One of the things that was said that struck me in my mind was Alan Stewart talking about the degrees of the storms going lower and lower, which means, as you know, when the storms come across the Atlantic, they curve upward, north. But according to him, the forecast is, and the reality, which has been happening, is that they're going lower and lower south before coming up. And that will mean that God might turn his back on Trinidad and Tobago at some point in time, given what we feel about it. As well as we dealt this afternoon with the whole business of the Middle East, the dangers that are taking place. My last look at what is happening, the bombing has intensified on both sides. And Tel Aviv is being bombed, which was a sacred place for no Arab gunfire to reach in those areas. It hasn't reached, and we can see the consequences going forward from that. So, Chalo, that's a difficulty for this program today. Just to indicate to our listeners that tomorrow we are talking about a very serious matter that we have in Trinidad and Tobago, and that has to do with violence in school amongst young people, boys and girls. One time it used to be boys alone, but when we see the video of what is happening in schools, the girls are right up with the boys in terms of the violence against each other. We have the president of Tutor, and we have Mr. Hanif Benjamin, who is associated with the Children's Authority and looking at these matters, and he has a perspective on it. We were supposed to get the president of the PTA, but the president is out of the country and he's returning at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so that will be a difficult time for him to get involved. And he has not been able to persuade anybody from his organization to come on stream. Hopefully, we will get somebody else, perhaps a parent somewhere or the other, to come on, an individual parent, to talk about their own concerns going to school. Chalo, your children are still in school?
Yes, I have two that is in school right now actually. one actually within the battle zone of tranquility.
Oh boy, oh boy. Yeah. So that it's something that affects all of us. I was at a venue of little boys. I won't say too much about it to identify the area, but I have an interest in the boys playing a game, a sport, and right in front of everybody, bigger boys attempting to bully smaller boys. And I'm talking about boys at the age of 10 and 11 and 12, and smaller boys at the age of 6 and 5, and so on, getting bullied. So this thing is going everywhere amongst children of all ages, and therefore we have to be concerned. When it comes home to us, a relative, a friend, or somebody like that, we pay interest, but the thing is spreading. So we want to talk about that tomorrow. We'll have the tutor president, and we will have Hanif Benjamin, as I said, to come and talk with us. And hopefully we'll get somebody else, a representative of some kind of parent group, to come and join the chat. So that's it for today, Chalo. And tomorrow again, we are back on the stream.
Tomorrow we look forward to it. And thank you so much, Tony. Great program as always. All right, so people, this has been the Drive Time Exchange right here on New Era TT Radio. Let me bring this song right from the top as we go up to 6 o'clock.
From ever since time began, has been inflicted time and again by man against fellow man. Yet man wouldn't learn from history. It makes him more violent, producing deadly weaponry with nothing but evil intent. So the war could never be over. Peace will never be seen, long as man in his quest for power keep destroying fellow human beings. Agony of defeat will linger. Nations still hating one another and superpowers. They're looking for more power. As long as violence and aggression still dwell in the hearts of man, brother, the war will go on. It cannot be won. No, the war will go on. It cannot be won. Fallout from war is chaos. Plenty agony, plenty pain. Economy's left in shambles that may never rise up again. Collapse of the money system, disruption of foreign trade. People turning against their leaders for the blunders that they have made. Environmental pollution, radiation taking its course, and the thousands that die in battle. Oh, what a waste of human resource.